Welcome. My name is Charlotte Galgosi, and I am the program coordinator for the Equity and Leadership team at the Early Childhood Investment Corporation. We worked to launch the National Center for the Family and Parent Leadership, a new initiative made possible through the incredible support of our friends at the Pritzker Children's Initiative. So today's webinar is a follow-up to the initial webinar in January of this year. If you were able to attend, we're going to offer a little more in-depth look at how compensating family and parent leaders works and who you can reach out to for support. I first would like to say that we're having some weather in Michigan, so if by any chance one of us drops off, we're gonna keep rolling and get it picked up, but just might be a little rocky here and there. It's blowing through for me, but I'm not sure, we're all in different parts of the state right now. So we appreciate your understanding and patience with that. We would love to hear where everyone is joining us from today. So go ahead and drop your city and state in the chat. As I know in the registrations, there were a lot of different states and cities coming in. Okay. Heather Wilson from the Equity and Leadership team today is providing support by monitoring the chat and PowerPoint for Sarah and I. We will be keeping everyone on mute to minimize distractions and using the Q&A area to collect questions to ensure a smooth and comfortable session for all participants. Any questions will be addressed and answered through a fact document that will be sent via email following the session today. This way, the participants will have a resource to refer to after the webinar, and we will also be recording this webinar today to share out as well. Realizing that we have a lot to learn from each other, we want to provide the opportunity to share in small groups your experiences with what barriers you have or are currently experiencing when it comes to compensating parents. I know in the registration, a lot of the programs that registered are currently compensating, but not everybody. So right now I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to let her introduce herself.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Zybert. I'm the program manager for the National Center for Family and Parent Leadership at the Early Childhood Investment Corporation. I wanted to let you know that I came into this work as a parent leader, and the support and compensation that I received at that time was critical for my family and allowed me to move to working in this field and uplifting and empowering other parent leaders as well. So this is something we really believe in, and Charlotte and I are so pleased to be here with you today. And I'll turn it back to you, Charlotte.
Thank you, Sarah. One of the goals of the National Center for Family and Parent Leadership is to build awareness, knowledge, understanding, and skills of early childhood systems on how to embed equity-focused family and parent leadership as their way of operating. One specific way to do that is to provide parent compensation to family and parent leaders who give their valuable time and expertise to our organization. Compensation for parent leaders creates accessibility and equity for families and is a critical support and show of respect for their willingness to share their invaluable lived experience and expertise. And that's one thing that I do at ECIC is process the payments and help manage the parent payment system that we have. So Sarah's going to give us a brief overview of what the National Center for Family and Parent Leadership is.
So you can see on the screen our very official language, and I will say in very plain speak, we are here because we believe in parent leadership and we want to support all of you who are doing this really important work hands-on. That means that we provide capacity building opportunities, we have resources, tools, and we work to gather together folks like yourself who are doing this work so that you can learn from each other. At the Early Childhood Investment Corporation, we believe we can strengthen early childhood systems, programming, and policies by elevating parent leadership and centering the realities of communities and families. The National Center for Family and Parent Leadership has created a promotional clip to highlight our work and get everyone as excited as we are about partnering with parent leaders. And Heather is going to show that video clip now. Now, Charlotte is going to ground us all as we begin in the Early Childhood Investment Corporation's definition of family and parent leaders, so that we're all on the same page about who we're talking about.
At ECIC, we refer to parents and families interchangeably to mean all adults who have a primary role of caring for a child, and that includes biological, adoptive, foster and step parents, grandparents, and other caregiving kin, and legal and informal guardians as well. It could also include parents who do not live with the child and are still involved in raising the child and thus have important perspectives as parents. So Sarah's going to share a little more about what to expect during your time with us today.
In January of this year, we offered a webinar titled Supporting Parent Leadership Efforts with Parent Compensation Part 1. During that session, we invited panelists to engage in a facilitated conversation, which covered topics like the need to organize pay practices into policy to address barriers to participation and provide equitable access to the table for families and parents you serve, lessons learned and guidelines for setting up a payment process, and compliance and fiscal considerations. We also shared examples from a Michigan parent leader who has worked with and within bureaucratic environments to create and implement equitable practices for reimbursing parents for their costs, time, and expertise. Today, to build upon what we previously covered, we're going to revisit portions of that webinar content to create context and a shared understanding, and then engage in a conversation together about where your organization is now with parent support efforts, any barriers that you may be facing with supporting parent leaders with compensation, and we're going to review a case study of Early Childhood Investment Corporation's partner, North Carolina. How the National Center for Family and Parent Leadership can provide support to your organization on your journey to provide sustained parent compensation. Charlotte?
One of the reasons organizations are not compensating parent leaders is due to challenges and barriers they may be facing. One of those barriers may be not knowing where to start or how to work through how the process would look for your program. So we're going to launch a poll right now and just give us an idea of how many programs that are with us right now that are currently compensating parents. Okay. So go ahead and close that poll. I'm sharing the results. You can see that we do have some 75% that are with us today that are compensating parents and some that are not yet. So it will be helpful in doing our reflection activity in the breakout sessions where you can share information together and learn from each other as well as the resources that we're going to share with you today and the questions that we hope to answer for you. Sarah?
Now, we're excited to bring parent leader voice into the space with this recording of Chandra Jones, a Michigan parent leader. She talks about her personal experiences of being compensated for her time and challenges she has faced.
Now, Chandra, after hearing from Joan, I just wanted to follow up with you as well. I know we've had this conversation before, and I know that many system leaders struggle with this and with building buy-in around parent leader payments, because there's still sometimes a feeling that parents need to volunteer for the things that they're passionate about, right? If this is about their children and they're receiving services, they should want to do it. So in your experience as a parent leader, right, how have you decided when to volunteer and when to maybe pass up opportunities that didn't, at the very least, offer reimbursement for your time and your expenses? And, second part, from your perspective, how do you think this could limit yours or other parent leaders' opportunities to engage?
So in my earlier years of being involved as a parent, I would say yes to almost everything. If my schedule would accommodate it, I would always say yes. And the reason I would say yes is because I cared. I wanted to be a part and be able to make a difference, not just for my child, but for others. However, I really didn't think about my resources or lack thereof. My thinking was, well, as long as it doesn't cost me anything, I can participate. But the reality is that there's always a cost. And so this is a more local situation. I was receiving respite, and I would use my respite care to go and attend a meeting about how to improve, because they wanted parents to be able to be there. And it was all because I cared. However, caring didn't fill up my gas tank. I was using my resources and the resources that I was receiving from the services to the meeting, because I wasn't being compensated. I wasn't being compensated at that time. So it just helped me over the years to say, you know what, if I'm not being reimbursed, if it's actually taken away from my family, then how can I be able to support? Because I'm losing something. And once I had that realization, it helped me to be more decisive about things that I chose to be involved in, because I had to think, okay, what are they saying? Does it line up with my values? And also, am I being valued by being offered compensation and reimbursement, not using my respite, I was in a mom's club and not bartering with the other parents. Well, they can watch my kids so I can go to a meeting, versus me being able to use that time to run errands or do something else with another family member.
Thank you. It's an important perspective too. Now, Chandra, after hearing from
As you can see, Chandra is a valuable advocate for parent conversation through her lived experiences, and she continues to advocate. So we appreciate her voice and her input today. So thinking about the challenges and barriers you have or might be facing when compensating or planning to compensate family and parent leaders, or what you've experienced yourself as a parent leader, we invite you to learn together during a 10-minute Think, Pair, and Share opportunity. So during this time, we just ask that everyone have your cameras on to engage, and you have the opportunity to share, like I said, your challenges, concerns, wisdom about parent leader compensation. We're going to give you 2 questions to answer. And then when we come back together, we're just going to ask that one person records those 1 to 2 responses that you might have during your conversation and post those in the chat for us today. So those questions are going to be, the first one is just, what is your current process, if any, for compensating parent leaders? The question 2 is going to be, what is one barrier you are experiencing when it comes to compensating parent leaders? And we'll post those in the chat. However, when you go into the breakout rooms, you won't be able to see that chat. So you might want to hang on to those yourself when you go into the chat and remember what those questions are. So as you arrive in your breakout room, I said, please choose one person to keep the notes, and be prepared to share 1 to 2 responses in the chat when you come back. So Heather is going to go ahead and break us up into breakout rooms now. Okay. Welcome back. So we hope you had some rich and enlightening conversation with each other, and we hope that you would take a minute and just post a couple topics that you've talked about in the chat right now for everyone to see. If you had designated a person that had taken notes. See any of those coming in? Not yet. Okay, I think the chat is set to only be seen by hosts. All right, Heather, are you seeing some of the responses? Okay, we're not being able to post in the general chat. We'll go ahead and fix that and find a way for you to share while Sarah's going to we'll move on and while we work on that. And she's going to talk about how one partnership that ECIC has works to support parent leaders.
So, utilizing the National Center for Family Engagement and Leadership Framework, the Early Childhood Investment Corporation partnered with North Carolina to develop, implement, and evaluate a Train the Trainer model series for parent professional teams titled Welcoming Families to the Table. Parents were compensated for time spent participating on planning teams, becoming a trainer, and for conducting trainings. The North Carolina Division of Child Development and Early Education partnered with the Michigan Early Childhood Investment Corporation to bring a virtual early childhood family leadership conference to North Carolina families in 2022 and 2023, where parents had the opportunity to be compensated when participating in any of the following ways: by attending the conference if they met the criteria set by the North Carolina Division of Child Development and Early Education, serving on a planning committee for the conference, presenting at the conference as experts on subject matters, or moderating conference sessions. North Carolina family and parent leaders also have opportunities for compensation when they review materials being produced and when they participate in promotional materials and testimonials. We also want to mention that, according to our parent leader partners, including a line item for parent supports is critical to the success of this work. So when you're drafting budgets, it's very necessary to be thinking about including a line item for parent supports. The National Center for Family and Parent Leaders partners with North Carolina to process the payment requests by identifying staff members to track and send payment requests, communicating to the National Center Program Coordinator when a parent needs to be compensated and what the compensation is for. The National Center sends a secure DocuSign form to the parent to fill out either by email or text, or acquires backup documentation and submits via email to Early Childhood Investment Corporation's accounts payable. The parent is then paid by their chosen method of payment. Heather, if you would advance the slide for us, please. So earlier, we were able to bring parent voice into the room, and we believe that it's equally important to hear the agency side of things. So we have a video clip to do just that, and Heather is going to show that clip for us now.
And now I want to switch gears to Kelly again to share with us, in addition to advice that you heard from Joan and Chandra around some best practices considerations, what some considerations from procurement and compliance standpoint might be. So Kelly, as you mentioned earlier, providing payments for parents for their time and expenses is allowable. Now, when is it allowable, and what are a few primary or key factors systems should consider from a procurement grant standpoint for paying their parent leaders?
Sure, Natalia. So as Joan mentioned really succinctly, parents are consultants. So a lot of the cost principles that you would consider when making other purchases or contracting with people are quite similar. And the few that I really key in on when we're talking about federal funds and thinking about uniform grant guidance cost principles, the first is really necessary and reasonable for performance of a federal award. So if paying parent leaders is part of your work, then key factors there are writing that into your scope of work so it's documented and that it's in your budget. And to be sure you're considering market prices. So again, this conversation we're just having about setting rates when you're establishing that and documenting how you arrived at those rates. However that may be, gives you that extra backup documentation for how you came to that decision. The second cost principle to consider is adequately documented. So anybody who's in the finance or compliance space really knows. So like any other expense you will have or incur, ensuring you have that proper documentation is for each of your payments is equally as critical. And that can look different in in many ways as long as you have it documented. And then for something else you would want to consider, in my opinion, is if it's possible or beneficial to include something to this effect in your organization's financial policies or procedures that can serve as additional guidance, not only to you and your colleagues for how to implement, but also, again, supporting documentation. For us, our board approves our policies and procedures, so we know we've got a good line for that it's been reviewed and we're meeting all of the requirements. And it allows us that extra guidance as well. The third principle to consider is written approval from the awarding agency. And I think this is especially true if paying parent leaders is new to you or new to existing work that you've had established. So having that approval documented then supports your scope of work and your budget, and we kind of check all those boxes along the way. When we're thinking about private or philanthropic grants or funding, some of the same general principles really apply. Even though these funds are typically more flexible, we still want to honor those factors, including parent payments in your scope of work and budget helps your funders know where you are using those funds wisely to support the work, and again, adequately documenting your expenses. And then lastly, thinking about things from an accounts payable perspective, and tracking those expenditures so income can be appropriately recorded. I think I've seen a little bit of something in the comments about, the $600 threshold. That's absolutely something that is critical to pay attention to. So you're not upfront, so you're not having to backtrack on that later in the year.
Thank you, Kelly. I know it's so important to have these considerations around allowance and how to use funds appropriately. And before I go to our next question, I'm seeing a question in the chat speaking to this accounts payable piece and the $600 piece. And I know this is something that you and I have talked about it in the past. So little out of order, but can I ask a quick question from the chat? And that is, are parents required to provide a social security number in order to be compensated? And, you know, can we speak to that real quick before we move on?
Absolutely. And it is an important question. And we have had a lot of conversation about it. Transparently, I'm not a tax professional. So, but what I understand is if you are hitting that $600 threshold, that meets the IRS requirement for reporting income, then we do need to collect a social security number, because that allows the organization to report that as income as required by the IRS. I know you probably have other great guidance to provide around that when that's been a challenge.
Yeah. So yeah, as a one-time only, under 599, right? We can continue to provide the payment. So thank you. And so this is great advice. And so I'm thinking.
All right, thank you.
And now I want to.
Okay. Oh, hopefully you gathered some tips and it was helpful from Kelly. And we also have gathered some information and took some time to create some resources that might be helpful to you and your program. So through our work with our partners in compensating family and parent leaders, ECIC has created the Early Childhood Investment Corporation's Guide for Setting Up a Parent Payment System. So this resource will be shared with you via email after the session today, as well as the fact document that we've created so far, and with some troubleshooting tips in there as far as our experiences of what we've had with paying parents so far, and feedback from partners. Okay. And that information, that fact document is a follow-up from the webinar in January. So Sarah will give us some more information as to how your program can find support for compensating parents.
The Early Childhood Investment Corporation launched the new National Center for Family and Parent Leadership in the summer of 2022 to provide comprehensive capacity building opportunities and supports that help states, organizations, and communities embed equity-centered and equity-driven family and parent leadership to strengthen early childhood systems, programs, and policies. As state agencies and organizations partner with parent leaders on their boards, committees, work groups, advisory boards, and more, they must set up systems to fairly compensate parent leaders with stipends and reimbursement for participating, childcare, transportation, and other barrier elimination. Is your organization committed to compensating parent leaders, but struggling to implement the policies, processes, and financial infrastructure to efficiently and accurately process payments? Sometimes organizational policies and processes are not conducive to processing these types of payments. ECIC has been paying parent leaders for more than a decade through a system designed to ensure efficiency, timely payments, and proper documentation for tax requirements and federal, state, or philanthropic grant compliance. ECIC staff value parent leaders as much as you do. We strive to balance prompt payments and flexibility to meet parent and organizational needs and ensure proper documentation and accounting practices are followed. If you're interested in learning more about the parent payment processing services that ECIC offers, please fill out the questions on the form that Heather is hopefully going to link in the chat for you. You can also reach out to Charlotte or myself directly to schedule a time to talk with a member of our team.
Thank you, Sarah. And it looks like we have our chat option figured out. So we have some added in there, and I'd like to read one. So from Saisha, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. There's a variety of ways to compensate with gift cards, reimbursement, and checks, with the understanding that parents are the experts. So she goes on to say the barriers are everyone can't use gift cards, and how to pay parents that are on a visa or undocumented. And yeah, it's important to, I think, point out that, gift cards are still considered income, if, cash gift cards, and that then needs to be taxed, like just as a payment, so as well. So, and will parents lose their SNAP benefits if they earn too much and have to claim the money, which I know can be a difficult decision for a lot of parent leaders that have to make, are they going to take their time and be able to give their time, or, balance with their benefits that they're getting and not make too much money for that. So I know that's a hard decision to make as well, and how we can support them. So when hiring parent leaders on staff, they can't be paid twice is a barrier, and understanding the best way to compensate parents that travel to us, yes, as far as traveling reimbursements. And I know in the guide that I had mentioned that we'll send, that we outline how ECIC does travel reimbursements as well, and we use what we use to be able to come to those rates and those decisions, and advance payment for travel as well. So thank you very much for that input. We appreciate it. And please feel free to add any questions that you have into the chat there, that we'll get and be able to follow up with and add to our facts document and send with answers to you. So we appreciate your time today. And if you'd like to explore more a family and parent leader compensation process further with us, go ahead and click on that link that Heather had put in the chat and set up a time to connect with us personally to answer your questions, or that can just be connected to an email that we can start having a conversation offline as well. So thank you for your time today. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, no matter how long is left in your time zone. And we hope to talk with you soon. Bye.